Hi everybody, I'm Ryan Wihelm. I'm a career counselor in the Office of Career Counseling and Support Services. So our office is in the Yonkin on campus. Do you guys know where the Yonkin's at? So the very, very south end of campus, right above or right next to Hangover Easy. So what we do, any student can go to us, right? So you guys all, I believe, are EHE, so you have a career services through EHE, right? So that office will help you with resumes, cover letters, interviewing, all that stuff, and help you with a little bit, not really with job placement, but helping you figure out what jobs are out there to kind of track down and try to match up for what you're looking for. What our office does is three main things. So the first thing we do is job search campaign stuff. So that's all the resumes, cover letters, interviewing. Is anyone thinking about graduate school? Cool. So if you're thinking about graduate school, we can help with that. We can help with personal statements, interviewing for that, all that, okay? The second thing that we do is career exploration. Is anyone somewhat unsure of what they want to do when they graduate? It's okay to admit it, okay. We can help you with that, right? So we look at your values, your strengths, your interests, and all that, and kind of mush it all together and try to figure out, okay, where will you be most happy? Where will you be most fulfilled? And then the third part of it is all the messy stuff that goes on while you're trying to figure out what you want to do. So anxiety, fear, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all those things, maybe you're sure of what you want to do, you just don't believe you can do it, okay? And so our office can help with that part as well. We do walk-in appointments. They're half-hour long. We do those in the summer, Monday from 1 to 3, and then Wednesday from 9 to 11. First come, first serve. When you pop in, you'll fill out some paperwork, and then you'll get to meet with somebody for about a half hour. The other part of that is hour-long appointments, where you can call in and you can set up an appointment. That's much better because then we can go into some depth and really explore things. One of the things that you can do after this is come in for a mock interview. Normally that's a 2-appointment process, but after you've gone through kind of this strategy session, you don't need to do that first appointment, because that first appointment is the strategy session that we're going to talk about today. Okay? Cool. Any questions about that? No. As we go through, feel free to shout out. If you have any questions or anything like that, I prefer to hear your thoughts and your questions as we go through, instead of just me talking for 50 minutes. So, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't do mornings very well, but I really like Dr. Weiser, so I'm happy to come in for this class. And I love sports too, so I'm sure I like most of you people too. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about interviewing. First, we're going to talk about how to prepare. Then we're going to talk about what to wear. Then we're going to talk about how to introduce yourself. Then thinking about what they are looking for, and then what to do after the interview. Okay? So the first thing is how to prepare. How many of you have had interviews? Cool. So a ton of you. How do you prepare? What thoughts do you have? How did you prepare? Go for it.
You can research the company or practice interviewing with somebody.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. How do you research them?
Either, I guess, online, you can just look them up online. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That I've found.
Cool. Great answer. Any other thoughts about that? Cool. Okay. So research is by far going to be the first step, and we'll dive into that. So first thing is research company organization. So it would be ideal if you can find out who's interviewing you and their names. Okay. So how many people have LinkedIn? Okay. How many people know of LinkedIn if you don't have it? Okay, so most of you. So LinkedIn is basically a professional networking website where you can search people, search their history, search where they've worked, search their educational background, all of that, okay? So you can find out quite a bit about somebody after you get their name and you know where they work, right? And so you can draw connections that way. And it's always good to know who's going to interview you before you go in, okay? Next thing is points of pride. So try to think about why they think they're great. You said look at the website, right? So I think that's a perfect way to do it. They're going to put a whole bunch of stuff on their website about the projects and the programs and the stuff that they think makes them great. Maybe they won some award, things like that, right? And so that's a great place to find that out. The next thing is their mission and vision. This is going to be on their website as well, but it'll be all over the place. Okay, so what is it that are the goals of that organization? So finding that out, trying to link that to you. And then current and former employees. both really, really helpful in terms of figuring out is this where I want to work, and then how can I connect myself to that. You can go online, you can go through LinkedIn, you can find OSU alumni. That's a whole different presentation, but it's a really cool thing on LinkedIn. I used to hate LinkedIn, but then I figured out that you could do this, and it's super, super helpful. If there's an organization that you want to work for, let's say you wanted to work for the Indians, let's say, right? You can go online, you can search Ohio State alumni and the Indians and find who's working there, contact them, and then you've got a connection with that company. It's so much better to go in with a connection and know somebody, because then you're just not a faceless resume that's being submitted. Now you have a connection, and they can walk down the hall, ask some questions to that person about you, that kind of thing. So research is the first thing. The next thing that people really, really struggle with is tailoring their experiences, right? So what you need to focus on is, in the very first question, is what is needed for this specific job, okay? There's two things that people will look for, that employers will look for. Number one is going to be general, and then the number two is going to be specific, okay? Specific is somewhat encompassed within that general part. So what you need to be thinking about is, no matter what job I'm applying for, what my answers need to be targeted towards that job. So if I'm applying to be a lifeguard, I need to show that I can swim, right? If I'm applying to be a teacher, I need to show that I've taught, right? If I'm applying to be a principal, I need to show leadership skills. Some skills will be universal, some skills will be transferable from thing to thing, but you're being a principal, they don't care if you can swim, right? So they better care if you're a lifeguard if you can swim. So always be thinking about, what is it about this specific job that they're looking for. So when we talk about the general part, there's three things that anything you apply for will always look for. This is true for graduate programs, it's true for any job you look for, any internship, all that, okay? The first is skills. Can you do the job, okay? The second is motivation. Do you really want to do this job? Can you prove that, I'm not just applying to any job. This is the job that I really want to do, okay? And the third thing is fit. So this is, do I really fit with this organization? Do I really want to work for this organization? Again, I'm not just applying for any organization. I'm applying for this one for this reason, okay? What you want to start out with, so the first thing you want to do is research, right? The second thing you want to do is ignore any questions that they may ask and just think about this stuff. Go back to make a list and list off skills, right? And jot down what are 3 skills that I think match up with this particular job, okay? Then, how do I show my motivation? And then how do I show my fit? And that's your bank. Basically, what that does, it lets them control what you want them to know, okay? So a lot of times people will go into an interview and they'll think, okay, I'm really nervous, I'm really focused on all the questions that they're gonna ask me. But if you go into it and you're armed with the idea that these are the 6 things that I want them to know, and these will come up no matter what, that's your bank. Okay, so they could say, I really like your shirt, and you might say, oh, thank you so much. I got it at my internship where I did blank, blank, and blank. And really what you're doing is you're telling them one of your skills, right? They're probably not going to say, I like your shirt or anything like that, but it might come up. The first thing that you're going to want to do with skills is this, okay? Pretty much every job you apply for will have 3 sections. It'll have the job posting will have 3 sections. It'll have, these are the requirements for this specific job. These are the preferred qualifications for this job, and these are the job duties, okay? When it comes to requirements, you want to have as many of those as possible. You do not need to have all of those. People really struggle with that, okay? If it says you need 15 years of experience and you have no years of experience, probably don't apply for that job. But if it says 1 to 3 years, you can probably apply for that job, okay? The only exception to this rule is federal jobs, government jobs, right? They're very, very specific about what they will hire, so the things that are in the requirements are actual requirements. But in most jobs, they would love for you to have most of that, but if I'm applying to the job too, I've got 6 of the 10 things they're looking for, you've got 7, you're gonna get the job, right? As long as, no one else is applying. Preferred qualifications, that's just what they are. They would love for you to have it. There's no guarantee that you'll have it. That's okay. Okay. Job duties, that's what you will do on the job. You don't have to have done any of this work ever before in your life, but it's awesome if you have. Think about it like this. If you're going to start the job on Monday, what won't you need trained in? That's really, really helpful for them, so you can hit the ground running. It's okay if you need trained in a whole bunch of stuff, so don't think, oh, I've never done this, so I can't do it. A lot of times with job duties, they're just projecting, here's where your education was, here's where your internship was, we think you can do this. Okay, and so for this part, for the skills part, what you'd want to do is create a chart. On one side, you would have the things listed, the requirements, preferred qualifications, and job duties. On the other side, you would have the ways that you match up with that. Okay, and that's the first part of your bank. The second part is your motivation and passion. When you're thinking about motivation and passion, we want you to think about two things. The first is a job that's opposite of what you want to do. So I always do lumberjack. Does anyone in here want to do lumberjack? No. Okay, no one's ever wanted to be lumberjack, so that's a safe one. So I always do lumberjack. The reason that we do that is because we want you thinking about the big picture. So think about what you want to do, and then think about, okay, well, why do I want to do this instead of be a lumberjack? Usually what you do, so take doctor, for example. This is the easiest image for me to give. So let's say I wanted to be a doctor instead of a lumberjack. What I would say is, okay, I want to work in healthcare. I want to help people. I love medicine, that kind of thing, right? And so what happens there is all I've done is paint the big picture. So what we also want is the small picture. And so for that, we want you to think of a similar job. It's very easy to think about nurse versus doctor, right? So why do you want to be a doctor instead of a nurse? Well, maybe there's some more leadership in that. Maybe there's more autonomy, and I don't have someone over me telling me what to do all the time, right? And so in some areas of nursing, that you don't have that, right? So you can also think about different niches within nursing. The main thing is think about it broadly in a big picture sense, and then think about it in a small picture sense, okay? That's the second part of your bank. So the first thing is write down the skills. Second thing is why this job is what I want to do more than anything, okay? The third thing is fit. With the fit part, what you want to answer is why does this school / company / organization, whatever, fit you more than any other place in the world? Okay, so this is tough because a lot of you will be applying for a lot of jobs, and you'll have a interview on Monday with Ohio State and an interview on Friday with Michigan, and you need to be able to tell Michigan why they're better than Ohio State. Okay, which is probably not going to be easy for a lot of you, right? So, but you need to be able to find those niches and those things, and that's where the research comes into play. Okay, so that's the second part. So first you do your research. Second, you look into how they you create your bank of answers. So you haven't even thought about any questions that they're going to ask you yet. All you're thinking about is this is what I want them to know before this interview is over. Okay? So the third part is how to answer questions and thinking about a little bit more about what they want to know. Okay. What we're going to do a little bit today is review some common interview questions, but that's something you should absolutely do. So that's why you have this sheet. You should go through question by question and jot down, not today, sorry, but before an interview, go through question by question, jot down answers to all of these. You will not memorize any of those answers fully. What you will memorize is the bullet points, as if you're giving a presentation, right? And so if they ask you what your strengths are, you'll memorize 3 strengths. Okay, and then there's a little bit beyond that we'll get to. Okay, so generate and rehearse stories, we talked about that, and then develop questions for them. We'll go into that a little bit more, and then do a mock interview. I absolutely suggest coming into our office to do a mock interview, but you can take these questions and you can go to your best friend and say, ask me these questions, right? As long as you're really thinking about it and getting feedback from them, that's okay. I have more experience doing that, but certainly, as long as you run it by somebody, that's great. When you're answering questions, what people struggle with by far the most is depth. Okay, they'll say, "What are your strengths?" Or the question will be, "What are your strengths?" And they'll say, "I'm really adaptable, I'm really hardworking, and I'm really, I don't know, what's another strength? I've got great leadership skills," right? And then they just stop. What you want to do is go into a lot of depth with all those. And to do that, you want to go with this formula up top. Okay, so if I say, what are your strengths, and you say, I'm really adaptable, you want to point out, okay, this was a problem I was trying to solve, or a scenario that I was trying to solve. This was the action I took to try to solve that problem, and then this is what happened in the end. Okay, so you want to have that level of depth with pretty much everything. You don't need to go strictly with this formula every time you answer the question, but you need to give an example with background details. If you've worked at a company, and if you worked at Ohio State, everyone's going to know what Ohio State is, right? But if you I worked at Ohio Dominican also, if I'm applying to a school in Michigan, I need to explain what Ohio Dominican is, right? Because they won't know what that university is, and I might need to explain it to you. I don't know if you guys know what Ohio Dominican is. But but you need that background. Always be thinking, I always tell people, as if like I'm shrunken down on your shoulder and I'm saying, prove it, right? Because most people don't prove it. They just say, I've got great communication skills, I've got great leadership skills, but they don't prove it with their comments, okay? Also think about answering the question, why does this matter? I've started talking about this, why does this matter to this position? And then you'll go into depth about matching this up with that particular job, okay? So demonstrate your skills, answer the question, back it up with a story, connect it to employer needs. If you can, show as much achievement as possible. If you're in an internship, well, you are all in an internship now, but if in your internship now you helped to take a filing system and totally created a new system that will streamline things and make things go much smoother for that company, that needs to be clear through your interview, right? That you did this achievement, that you created this. If you were, employee of the month, that needs to come out, okay? All this stuff needs to be clear. Always remember that the tone of the interview is what you can do for the employer, okay? Too many people think about, for your internship, it was okay to say, this is what I want to learn here, right? As you get a full-time job, we don't want that almost at all, right? We just want to talk about, this is what I can do for this company, not this is necessarily what I'm going to learn here. That's okay a little bit, but the focus really needs to be on, these are the skills I bring to the table, this is what I can do for you. Cool. We'll get back into a bunch of question type stuff, but we want to move on to the second part. So what do you wear to an interview? What are your thoughts? What have you worn to an interview before? Go for it. Cool. Cool. Perfect. Perfect. Anything else? Any other ideas? Go for it.
I think it just depends on the company. You have to look at like where you're applying, but like a place to be like overdressed and underdressed.
Yep. Cool. Those were the exact two perfect answers. So you definitely want to be as overdressed instead of underdressed for sure. I would always default to a suit for sure. Okay. So just some tips here. So conservative two-piece business suit, dark blue, black, gray. I thought that said green when I was reading it. I was like, don't wear a green suit. That's not a good idea. Long sleeve shirt, blouse, white preferred. Something that's just one color is usually good for that. Well groomed, so if you have a beard, trim it up before you go. All that, so get a haircut if you're getting a little shaggy. Minimal cologne and perfume. You don't want to go in and reek of cologne and perfume. No gum, candy, or cigarettes. Even if you smoke, don't smoke before you go in because it will go in with you for sure. And some companies are like, that's a no-no. No cell phones. You can take it in with you, but make sure it's off. Okay, make sure the sound's off. And then bring a briefcase or portfolio. I usually bring one, and I forgot to bring one this morning. So do you guys know what a padfolio is? So it's like, it's this fake leather kind of folder. You can get it almost anywhere, bookstores, all that. And basically you can open it up. You'll have a legal pad on one side, and then you'll have a folder on the other side. Within that folder, you're going to want to put all of your resumes, your references, your cover letter for however many people are interviewing you. Okay. The odds are they're going to have all this stuff, but if they don't have it, you want to have it there for them. Okay. On the other side, on the legal pad, you can write down some notes. You do not want to write down notes to your answers. Okay. What you want to write down is notes to where am I going, what time, who am I interviewing with. That's fine. And then your questions for them. That's perfectly appropriate. That just allows you not to have to memorize something. Okay. So. There's some examples of what to wear. It's kind of small, but don't get too carried away with accessories, watches, things like that. Make sure everything fits pretty well. Tuck everything in. Like I said, I would default to a suit, but there's definitely times where you can get away with wearing less than a suit, right? So I know Abercrombie, for instance, they want you to come and interview in Abercrombie clothes, right? And so, which is fascinating to me, but definitely, default to a suit for sure. Try to show off that professional style as much as you can. Cool. Okay. So how do you make a good first impression? What are your thoughts about this one? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. So show up a little earlier, at least on time. Anything else? Cool. Genuine and honest. Yep, for sure. Yep. If you're making up stories about what you've done, it will probably be pretty clear. So, anything else? Go for it.
If you're sitting in a lobby with the receptionist, talking to the receptionist, it's most likely to ask what your impression of the interviewer was.
Cool. Yeah. So all of this is on the next slide, like verbatim. So part of me is like, did you guys see? Did I skip to the next slide? So show up on time and prepared, right? So that was said for sure. Try to be there, 10, 15 minutes early. Lots of times, you're used to kind of knowing where to go. Like for instance, I was coming here. I started walking up the stairs, and the second floor says you can't come in here and go around the sides or whatever, right? So stuff like that happens all the time. Parking in big cities can be a struggle too. So always think about that. Everyone is interviewing you. That's huge, right? That's what she just said. This is, you may not think this is true, but it's totally true. If there's ever a tie, or oftentimes the receptionist or administrative assistant is a part of that interview process, right? We had somebody where we had two candidates come in. They were both pretty equal, and one of them was just a little bit more, I don't know, frustrating is the right word, but when they were trying to schedule the appointments or the times to interview, wasn't as easy to work with, right? And that became clear down the road, right? And so that was kind of a tiebreaker, okay? Direct eye contact, warm smile, firm handshake. A lot of times people will really kind of work on the handshake and that kind of thing. I mean, you don't want it to be overly strong, you don't want it to be overly light, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. Eye contact is good. If you're ever doing a panel interview, like there's 4 people and you, what you want to do is when someone asks the question, make eye contact with them and then bounce around and then go back to that person, okay? Pretty much a panel interview is the exact same thing as a regular interview, except there just happens to be more people. It's not like they're all going to fire a question at you and you need to hit on all the questions right away, right? You're going to get one question, there just happens to be 4 people in there, okay? Avoid potentially divisive topics. Unless you're going into something that's connected to politics or religion, don't talk about politics or religion, okay? Stick with the positives, even if you had negative experiences and what you learned. So if you left your last job, if you were fired from your last job, or you did not like your boss, try to focus on, this is what I gained from that, this is what I'm going to now. Always try to think about, this is what I'm walking towards, not what I'm walking away from, okay? Okay, so we're going to go into some specific questions and how to answer them. So this is that slide that we had earlier that outlines how to go about answering them, right? And so this is probably the most important thing. This is where everyone struggles in the mock interview that we do. So always be thinking, how can I go into more depth about this? How can this be more targeted towards what I'm doing? And then always focus on those 3 things, so skills, motivation, and fit. So what we'll start with first is the questions that you will probably get related to skills, okay? The first one is going to be, tell me about yourself. People have interviewed, is this normally the first question you've gotten, that kind of thing? Okay, so people really, really struggle with this because what they do, they have a tendency to really talk about personal things, right? So this is where I was born, this is how many brothers I have a dog, all that stuff, right? That stuff is okay to talk about, only if it's connected to your skills, your motivation, and your fit, okay? So what you want to do when you're thinking about that question, tell me a little bit about yourself, you want to think about it like a staircase. The bottom stair is when I first became interested in this field, okay? And the top stair is why blank is why this job is the perfect next step for me, okay? In the middle staircase, the middle steps, those are the things that you've done in between. And on this question, so I've been telling you, go into depth, go into depth, go into depth. We don't want you going into depth on this question. What we want you to do is briefly mention, this is, when I first became interested in it, then highlight the experiences you've done, just mention that they exist, okay? It's almost like putting out a menu and letting them pick what they want to talk about down the road, okay? So you can even go back into those skills that we were talking about, and pick out the experiences from there, and then lay that out, hoping that they'll pick those to have you go into more depth about. And then at the end, go into your why this is the perfect next job. So an example of that, right? So for me, I'm in career counseling, right? And so what I would say is, I first became interested in career counseling when I was in law school, and I decided this wasn't going to be a fit. So I actually started going to a career counselor. Since then, I received my master's in mental health counseling. And I would go into a little bit more depth about that. And I did an internship at Career Counseling and Sports Services, and now I'm working full-time at Career Counseling and Sports Services. This next step is the perfect next step for me because of blank. Okay, so that's basically how you would answer that. People really struggle with when they're talking about, they go into too much personal depth about their personal lives, and they go into too much depth about those things too early. Okay. The second ones that are connected to skills are going to be the strengths and weakness question. We talked about strengths earlier, so when you're answering that question, make sure I would have at least 3, okay? And those should each be connected to experiences. Okay? Make sure you're doing that. When it comes to the weakness question, how many people hate the weakness question? Cool. So not all of you. That's good. So the weakness question tends to be very, very frustrating for people. There's 3 ways to answer it. Number 1, something that's obvious. Okay. If you haven't had experience in this field yet, they're going to know it. You can just tell them right out, I haven't had experience in this field yet, right? So, and then you can talk about, how you've learned quickly in other jobs and things like that. Okay. The next thing is answer with a similar skill and back it up with a story, right? So if it was a coding job, right, or if it's something at work that you have not had experience with a certain computer program, right? So you can talk about, this is a program I have had experience with, I picked it up this quickly, so on and so forth. The third way, and probably the way that most people will answer it, will be the baseline improvement today way. Okay? So for that, what you want to do is you want to think about a time where you messed something up. You weren't that good at it, right? And then you talk about that, and that's your baseline. Then you talk about tangible, concrete things that you can depict with you working hard to improve it. And then in the end, your actual improvement. The example for me is, my example is what I use is organization. And I always say, when I started graduate school, I wasn't very organized at all. I didn't, in undergrad, I didn't have to be all that organized. I had success without being organized. But then I got to graduate school and I had an internship. I had a whole bunch of classes. I was working part-time, all this. So if I wasn't going to be successful unless I became organized. And then I talk about the very concrete things I did to become organized, and then where I'm at today. That where I'm at today cannot be perfect, or else you're lying, and this is not a weakness, right? So what you would say is something like, I'm not very naturally organized, but practically I'm much more practically organized now. What this shows is 3 things. The first is humility. Okay, so if you can't admit a weakness, people might not want to work with you, right? So they want to work with people who can admit weaknesses. The second is that you will work hard when things go wrong, okay? So it's okay to have missteps as long as you try to solve them, okay? And then the third is where you're at today and that actual improvement, okay? The other questions that you will get are more behavioral. So what these are connected to are this part here, you absolutely have to do that scenario action result part. It might be something like, give me an example of a good decision you made, right? And so a lot of times people are like, going to Ohio State, it was a great school, right? Period, and that's it. But what you want to do is backtrack and say, going to Ohio State. When I was in high school, this is what I was considering. I had these options that I was considering. I chose Ohio State because of this. It was a great decision because of blank. So then you have that much more of that depth. Tell me about a problem you solved and the process you used. Always think about the process you used, right? So what you're trying to do is show your how you solve problems, right? How you go about, how you make decisions. That depth is what really matters in this. These things down here, so leadership, technology, diversity, initiative, and conflict. I would, depending on what area you're going into, have an answer for an example of you doing every one of those, because that question will probably come up. Tell me about a time where you've taken initiative at work. Tell me about a time where you worked with diverse populations. All of that. Okay? Cool. So the second part of this, and the other potential questions related to skills can be very open-ended, right? These are, this is an example. This would be, if anyone's thinking about med school or graduate school, oftentimes there's ethics questions, and this is where this type of question would come up a lot. Essentially what they will ask is, what would you do if blank? And they give you a scenario, right? And all they care about is your how you make decisions. They don't care about the specific answer that you give. So how you would answer is say, you would give two options, and you would say, option A has these positives and negatives. Option B has these positives and negatives. I'd choose option whichever because of blank. Okay, that's when it comes to ethical questions, right? If there is a specific answer to a question, don't worry about trying to find an option B, right? So if you've worked at an internship and you know this is how you solve this problem, right? Don't worry about making up a bad option just to go about trying to solve it. Okay. Cool. Okay, so we're going to give you an opportunity to test this out. So I want you to pair up really quick, and I'll give you a little bit of time, and I want you to think about your perfect job. Or let's think about your internship right now. Okay, so pair up and ask each other the "tell me a little bit about yourself" question. Make sure that you focus on things that are related to this specific job. So, what did you guys think of that? Any thoughts? Was it hard? I think when we do these examples in class, I think the hardest part is thinking of what was the job, what was we're talking about like narrow it down on the job posting, right? And so you don't necessarily remember that job posting, or maybe even for an internship there was no job posting, right? What did you guys find hard? What was easy? Any thoughts about this at all? Go for it. Yeah.
It seems like a really long time, and
Yeah.
then also kind of trying to keep track of everything you want to cover and like everything you already said.
Yep, totally. Don't worry necessarily about the 2.5 minutes, right? So people always ask me, how long should my questions or answers be? As long as it takes you for you to answer it, right? You don't want to talk for 10 minutes every answer, but you also don't want to talk for 30 seconds, right? So somewhere in between there. What you really want for the interview, what you want to happen in the interview is you lay out during this question, these are all the things I want to talk about. And then you want the entire interview to fall apart and you feel like you're just meeting with a friend and connecting with a friend and telling them about, your life, right? Because that is the third part, right? The fit, right? So people get hired on fit all the time. No one wants to hire somebody and then have them have a negative attitude in their office. Nobody does, right? And so that's where if you feel like the interview broke down and you're just talking, that's a great sign. Right, so don't worry too much about time. 2.5 minutes, I gave you 2.5 minutes, so it won't always last 2.5 minutes, and you'll go into it much more prepared, right? So, any other thoughts about that? No? Okay. So that was the skills part, right? So the second part is motivation. These are some of the questions that focus on motivation. So why this position and why here? You've seen our mission statement. How would you see yourself contributing to our mission? And then where do you see yourself in 5 years? Okay. So some of the strategies to answer that, we talked about thinking about a job that's opposite. So we talked about thinking about, why do I want to do this instead of be a lumberjack? We talked about a similar job. So that can be a little bit harder, thinking about, why do I want to go in this field instead of this field? Example for me, why do I want to go into career counseling instead of mental health counseling, right? And so I can really focus on that. Some of you might want to work in a high school instead of a college. Some of you might want to work at a school huge like Ohio State. Some of you may want to work at a small school, right? And so you can definitely dive into those reasons, right? The second part to think about is you could have chosen any field in the world, right? All of you are very smart. You got into Ohio State. You're doing great work, all of that, right? So you could have chosen almost anything. Why did you choose this field? What this will show is your passion, right? And then the third thing is have clear career goals, but both short and long term. When they ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you guys think you should answer there? There's one particular thing. Okay. So no matter what, answer this company. Okay. So even if it's going to be a short-term job, even if it's going to be a temp job, anything like that, you're telling them this is why this company, this is why I've applied to this company over all the other companies in the world. Okay, so this company. Also think about, so you'd answer this company, this organization, and then advancement, some sort of added responsibility. Might be a promotion, might be taking on new projects, whatever, right? So think about what's a realistic goal. Where do you realistically see yourself when you're going to graduate? And then what's an idealistic goal? Okay, it's okay to mention that idealistic goal. Like, I want to start this whole new program that doesn't exist. You don't necessarily have to do it ever, right? But you're talking about it, and it shows kind of the direction that you think you might want to go. Okay. So we're already paired up, so I'm going to have you guys really quick. We'll do a minute and a half this time, okay? And I want you to ask each other, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Okay. Keep in mind with this organization, essentially why with this organization, and then advancement. Cool? Go. Okay. So what did you guys think about that one? Sorry if I cut you off and you weren't quite done yet, but we don't have a ton of time. Any problems with that one? Any positive stuff? Anything you want to talk about? Was anything particularly hard? No? Anybody?
In my internship, I know there's a lot of like younger people that run the event management around here in Ohio State, so I could be like, 5 years, I see myself like having your job,
Yeah.
like, in front of the person I'm talking to.
Yeah. So that paints you kind of into a corner, right?
Yeah.
So you can absolutely say that, but I would say like in 5 years I would like a job like yours, or I would like, especially if there's more than one in that position, right? But it does, with a small, with a small group. So my office has one director, right? And so I said, I would love to be a director in 5 years. If not here, then somewhere else. You know what I mean? So yeah. But were you going to add more? I kind of cut you off there. No. Okay. But it is tough for sure. It's the smaller the organization. So, but you really do want to. You are an investment to them. It takes a long time to onboard people. Anywhere from 2 to 6 months, right? So if you leave right away, they have another opening, and it takes a long time, right? And so you want to depict, I'm going to be here a very long time. Okay. Cool. Any other thoughts about that one? No? Okay. So the third part is personality. And these are the questions that will help you show off your personality and your fit. Okay? What would frustrate me most about working with you as a team? What would be the positives of having you as a colleague? How would your previous supervisor describe you? Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker, and how was it resolved? To answer these, I would just make a list of these things, right? So start thinking about, what's my ideal work environment? What are my personal strengths and weaknesses? How many people are thinking about working in a higher ed environment, or a high school environment, or anything like that? Okay. So the reason I asked about higher ed is because StrengthsQuest is a language that how many people have taken StrengthsQuest? Cool. So tons of you, right? So it's a language that's almost universal in higher ed. But tons and tons of other places will know it as well. If you don't know about StrengthsQuest, it's a test you can take. It gives you your top 5 strengths out of 34. Just gives you a little bit of language. You can actually use that language in the interview if you want, right? So if you're struggling with thinking about what are my strengths, I would suggest taking it. It's just a book. You can do it through our office for sure. We can give you a code, or you can just buy a book at Barnes & Noble and do it. Okay. Think about who your ideal colleagues are, who your ideal supervisors are. The conflict question, which we talked about before. Think about any off-the-wall questions. So one of those, there's an example here of an off-the-wall question, number 10, and it says if you could be any kind of box of cereal, which one would you be and why? I can all but guarantee you won't get that question. But what you want to think about is, how can I answer this question to show off some of my skills? Sometimes with questions like that, people paint themselves into a corner, and they think, well, what cereal did I have this morning? And then they answer that, and then they're like, oh shoot, now I need to think of a trait that connects to that cereal. My suggestion would be, think of a trait first, then think of a cereal that matches it, right? So, and usually it's like, what kind of animal would you be, or something like that. Has anyone gotten any of those? Cool.
A friend of mine just took an interview, and she said it was really strange because it was all normal until he said, if you could be any superhero, which one would you be?
Yeah.
She said, I didn't know how to answer. So random.
Yeah. So the best way to answer it is think about the trait first, like loyalty or something like that, and then think, okay, well, what superhero has that, right? So, and then why is this company the perfect next step in your career path? Cool. So what do you do as the interview closes? What do you guys think? What do you need to do as you're winding down and then after it's done? Over it. Cool. Thank you notes. Yep. Any?
Thank them for their time.
Cool.
And ask any questions that you have.
Cool. Ask any questions you have. Absolutely. Cool. Any other thoughts there? Cool. So this is what you want to do when you're leaving. So briefly reiterate your interests and qualifications. You will probably get a question near the end that is, we have many qualified candidates, why should we hire you, right? So you have this bank that you've worked on in the beginning, and the goal is to have said all of those things. If you have not said all those things, and even if you have, you want to reiterate them then. If you, you definitely want to give the highlights of all that, but if you haven't mentioned like your second or third skill, this is the time you can throw that in, okay? You want to come up with questions for them. Anywhere from 2 to 5 questions for them. You can write them right down on that Padfolio that you have. The first few should be very professional focused, right? And so like focused on, you know, I saw this new project that you have going on. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Those kind of things, right? The last one, what you want to do is ask something that's more personal, right? And I don't mean like, how's your marriage or anything like that. I mean like, what's it like to live in Chicago, right? If you've never lived in Chicago, right? Or why do you work at Ohio State? Why do you love Ohio State, right? The reason why is now they're talking about themselves. People love to talk about themselves, and they're just about to leave you, right? And so now they have this good feeling, and they're leaving you. And that's a really good, you want that, okay? Ask about the next steps. So who, when, and how are they going to follow up with you, right? So they will probably tell you that. And then ask for a business card from all interviewers, right? The reason that you do that is so right after the interview, you want to write down little notes specifically about all interviewers, right? So if you four were interviewing me and I went through and you had mentioned something about living in Chicago, and then I write that down and I mentioned that in my thank you note, and then you had mentioned something about a new project that was coming up, then I say thank you for giving me some information about that project, right? And so I go into depth specifically about how you answered it, and I tailor those thank you notes specifically. It's absolutely ideal to mail them a thank you note, right? Because nobody gets mail anymore, so it's really noticeable if you get something in the mail. If you have to email it, that's perfectly fine too. Sometimes that's actually preferred because if their process is going really swift, the mail won't get there before your thank you note gets there, right? But no matter what, send something, okay? Take notes immediately after, always send a thank you note. Anticipate a second interview. What you'll find, depending on what you're applying for, the first interview may be over the phone and maybe an HR generalist who's asking very general questions. Second interview oftentimes is your boss and your immediate coworkers, right? And so they'll know much more specifically about that job. The HR person might not know almost anything about that job, depending on how big the company is, okay? So just more and more depth as you proceed. Prepare to respond to an offer, so think about how much money you'll make and all that. We're going to talk about that next week. And then call if you haven't heard anything and the deadline is passed. That's perfectly appropriate. Just don't call every day, and hound them that way, right? So, but it's perfectly appropriate to give them a call and say, I interviewed for this position. I just wanted to see where you were at with the process. Okay? That is all that I have. I've got my card up here if anybody wants it, and if there's any questions, I can hang out too. But thank you, and yeah, good luck. So, thanks.